All right. Thank you, everyone. This is our monthly on Monday series. Today is April 8th, Merits and Promotions for Senate Faculty, presented by Associate Dean Kyoko Yokomori. So thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, you can type them in the chat. You can unmute yourself and ask a question, and we'll make sure that we cover it as best we can tonight. So with that, I want to thank Dr. Kyoko Yokomori for joining us tonight and giving a presentation on merits and promotions for Senate and adjunct faculty.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming today. Oops, and I'm already frozen. Oh, okay. So, our office under the leadership of Dr. Jeff Abbott, and we have Dr. Cummings, Dr. Parek, the Associate Dean for Faculty Development, and Dr. Helmi and I were Academic Affairs, Senate, non-Senate Associate Deans. And also, I'm sure some of the Dean's analysts are here. So there are 5 Dean's analysts who are taking care of all the files that are coming from all the departments in School of Medicine for merit and promotion. So I'm really grateful for their knowledge and the guidance and effort. And so today we're covering the Senate faculty, inline, in residence, and 50-50, as well as clinical X, and also adjunct faculty members who are not Senate, but somehow it's folded into our category. And HS clinical series was nicely covered by Dr. Parek and Dr. Helmi last month, and the recording, I believe, is available. So just terminology. So assistant professor, associate professor, full professor. So these are different ranks. And within a rank, there are different steps. So these are the levels within each rank. And assistant professor is there are from steps 1 through 6, associate steps 1 through 5, and professor steps 1 through 9. And so this is a kind of a timetable of your academic progress. And you can see that assistant professor, they are supposed to spend 2 years at each step. And after 6 years as assistant professor, you're supposed to go up for tenure or go for promotion to become associate professor. And at UCI, the normative time is 6 years. And if you need more time, you can stay up until 8 years. And also you could use stop the clock mechanism, which I'll come back and explain a little bit later. And in addition to this merit increase every 2 years, there is another big review step, which is a mid-career appraisal, or MCA. And this usually happens 2 or 3 years after your initial hire, and hopefully 1 or 2 years before you're going up for tenure or going up for promotion. And the MCA is really just to better prepare you for upcoming promotion. And once you become associate professor, you can see that the first 2 steps overlap with assistant, and the last 2 steps overlap with the full professor. And so the first 3 steps, you'll get reviewed every 2 years, but the last 2 steps that overlap with the full professor, you're going to get reviewed every 3 years. And typically people go through this in 6 years or so, but some people take longer or some people go through it quicker. And the full professor, there are a few steps that I like to talk about. So one is that once you reach step 5, then you can stay at step 5 indefinitely until you retire if you prefer. You just have to go through satisfactory review every 5 years. But if you are making a good progress, you want to go up higher, then the next step from step 5 to 6 is actually a big step. It's almost same as promotion. Basically, all your accomplishments since you become a full professor will be evaluated in order to go up to step 6. The difference is that for the promotion, for assistant to associate, associate to full professor, you require external letters. But for advancement to step 6, you don't need that, or it's optional. And also, if you go up all the way to step 9, then the review period becomes 4 years. And if you're doing great, then you can go up to so-called distinguished professor or above scale, or AS. So I talked about this going up the merit. So what are you going to get evaluated on? So there are 3 pillars or 3 categories that your achievement gets evaluated. And so it's a teaching mentoring, creative activities. For inline in residence, it's basically research, and the service. And service can be subdivided into professional and university service activities, and you have to do both. You cannot just do one or the other. And for those of you who have clinical duties, you're gonna get evaluated in a fourth criterion, which is a clinical competence. However, if you're adjunct series, then you just need to do well in the 2 out of 3 activities. And so it's important that you talk to the chair to make sure that at the time of hire, you have clear idea which categories that you should be advancing your career. So last fall, the AP or academic personnel, the main campus, came up with the new merit categories for above scale. So I just wanted to explain this. So previously, they are just merit and merit plus, in addition to 5-year satisfactory review. But now there's a new step is inserted, which is the merit 1. And as you can see that satisfactory review, there's no salary increase, but for the merit 1, 2, 3, there are the salary increase by this percent shown here. And so what it is that if you're doing great in research and you're doing good job in the service and teaching, then you can go for merit 1 after 4 years minimum. But if you're doing great in both research and one other category, either teaching or service, and the third category, you're doing good job, then you can go for merit 2. If you're doing outstanding jobs in all 3 categories, then you can go for merit 3. And because these merit 2 and 3s are similar to acceleration, and so you cannot shorten the time. You cannot do the accelerated merit in time. So that's not permitted. You need to have at least 4 years here. So this is the overview of the flow of the review process. And so you are responsible for putting together your review file. You cannot just give CV to the departmental analyst and then ask them to prepare your file for you. You are responsible and you have to put together files because you are the best person to be able to explain the context and the significance of your accomplishments. And once you prepare this, I'm going to go into more details later, but once you prepare these documents, then those goes to the department. Your peers will look at your materials and discuss and vote. And one representative faculty member will write the letter summarizing the discussion. And sometimes, in addition to that, chair can write a separate letter or chair can vote together with the other faculty members. And the voting results and letters together with your file will come to dean's office. And some merit actions can be so-called dean delegated, meaning that the decision can be made within School of Medicine. But the actions, it has to go to the central review committee called Council on Academic Personnel, or CAP. CAP is consisting of 1 or 2 representatives from different schools on campus. So just keep in mind that not everyone in the biomedical science field. So there's not too much meaning for going into nitty-gritty of your details of your science, but it's more important that you prepare for almost lay audience and make sure you emphasize and clear that the significance and impact of what you're doing to people who are not in a science field. And some of the actions actually require additional review by the School of Medicine advisory committees. So there are 3 of them. So the HS clinical faculty files reviewed by CFAC, and the CXAC is specialized for clinical X, and ARAC is for inline, in residence, and adjunct series. And so the initial appointment, so I should go back to the Okay, so and then so sometimes the CAP will look at the review materials from the department, this advisory review committee, and the dean's memo, but they make their own recommendations. Sometimes they're different from what you or department or the School of Medicine dean wanted, and that happens. And I'll come back to that at the very end of the talk. Okay, so 2 advisory committees, they specialize in these different faculty series, and they're gonna review all the initial appointment or change of series, promotion, and acceleration more than 2 years, and advancement to step 6 of the full professor and above scale. And from the coming fall, they're going to also start to review the above scale merit 2 and merit 3. So if you are on time and if you're planning to submit your file for the action for this coming fall, you should have been talking to the chair last month. If not, you want to do that as soon as possible, because by May 1st, the department needs to submit the list of this action plan. And also, if your action requires outside letters, then the department should be soliciting the letters by June 1st. And this is important because not everyone who asks to write letters respond. And sometimes they write letters, but they're kind of short and not very analytical. And you ended up finding additional letter writers. And so it takes a long time. So it's always really important to start early on the letter solicitation. And this year, this is the deadlines for the file submission to the dean's office. And so promotions, both normal and accelerated, November 1st is the deadline. And if you're going for above scale, dean delegated merit or the adjunct professor series, then the deadline is December 2nd. All other actions, the deadline is October 3rd. So that includes mid-career appraisal, fifth-year review, reappointments, advancement to professor step 6, and also either normal or accelerated merit increase. And so the review material include the information all the way up to September 30th. So it's like 3 days later, it's deadline. And so we strongly recommend that you start putting together your file early, probably by the end of the summer. And if there's anything that you need to be added at the last minute, you could, but you really cannot assemble everything in 3 days after within this period. And even if you submit your file to the dean's office by these deadlines, oftentimes there are some mistakes that dean's analyst asks you to correct. And in the end, you might be very late. So we really try to be mindful in terms of adhering to these deadlines.
So I would just add there, Kyoko, is that when the dean's analysts ask faculty to correct the mistakes, they're not doing it to be mean. They're doing it because CAP is just going to kick it back to us. So they're actually doing it to speed up the process, even though it feels like they might be slowing it down for you. That's
right.
Not what's happening.
Yeah, definitely. And so I want to kind of briefly go over the actions for each rank. So the assistant professor, I mentioned that you're going to get reviewed every 2 years. And if you got hired before January 2nd of this year, you'll be surprised that you have, if you get hired before January 2nd of this year, then you will be assembling your first file for the first merit review this coming fall. So it's really coming up. And so our recommendation is you document everything, all the activities and accomplishment you do or invited talks, just document those as you go, because you cannot like wait till last minute and then try to remember what you did. It's just not going to work. Okay. And then MCA, as I mentioned, that is for the really to help you better prepare for the upcoming promotion. And you're supposed to get through this assistant professor level in 6 years. And I'll come back to stop the clock later. Okay, so associate professor, as I mentioned, it takes about 6 years. It can take longer or shorter, and then go to the next step, the full professor. And I should mention that assistant professor level, the merit increase are dean delegated, meaning the decision can be made within School of Medicine. But associate and full professor, the review would be alternating, be dean delegated and then going to CAP. And for the full professor, all the critical steps from the advancement to, for the advancement to step 6 or advancement to above scale, so these must go to the central committee, the CAP. Okay. And I already mentioned these critical steps, so I'm not going to go into the details. All right, so now I want to talk a little bit about each category, what you need to keep in mind. Oh yeah, before doing that, so these are the files that you need to prepare. So the most important document is this AP10 addendum. And we're going to have another webinar in June to really go into details of tips about how to fill out this AP10 addendum. And basically all the information that needs to be reviewed that happened during the review period should be included in this AP10. And the CV, on the other hand, covers your entire career, more than just the review period, to just complement this. And if you need letters, if you're going up for promotion or initial appointment, you need outside letters. And one thing I wanted to really emphasize is that if you are clinical X faculty members, I really, really strongly recommend to ask department to get letters from other UC campuses, because clinical X has this fine nuance, and the other university may not recognize, may not understand this, and they may come talk about some harsh, criticisms about what you're doing. And so it's really important that you get letters from other UC campuses that really understand the clinical X series. And also, you're required to provide 2 pieces of evidence for teaching. Typically, one is the teaching evaluations, and the other is your personal statement about teaching. And reflective teaching statement means that you're not just listing what you taught, but you're going to discuss your philosophy of teaching, your teaching innovation, anything you want to emphasize about the extra effort you are making to improve your teaching. And importantly, this is where if you get any negative comments in teaching evaluations, which you almost always do, this is where you need to discuss that. And the CAP is not looking for perfect teaching evaluations, but they're looking for your responsiveness to any negative comments. So as long as you're responding and say, hey, in response to these criticisms, I'm trying to make this kind of improvement, that's what CAP is looking for, and that's completely fine. And rather than ignoring or and then just overemphasizing the positive part, it's better to just talk about these negative comments you get. And if the comments is substantial, department letters should also discuss that. And again, it's not a big deal. As the important thing is that you show that you're engaging these reviews, and then try to respond to that. And the research and creativity statement, which is basically required for inline in-residence faculty members, and ClinX is kind of optional. But I strongly recommend that, especially if you want to, as you go up higher, you include this creative activity statement for any professor series, because CAP, again, may not understand the context or impact of what you're doing. So the more information, the context you provide, the better. And same thing for service statement. They are not required, but it's strongly recommended. And the diversity DEI statement is only required for initial appointment, and the CAP actually prefer this information to be inserted in the appropriate sections in the AP10. But if your creative activities center around DEI or something that you do really extra, then by all means you can have a separate statement. But you do not need it if you're not doing anything special on that, and which is completely fine. So this is different sections of AP10 addendum form, but I just wanted to show you because basically each sections represent the review criteria. Section 2, teaching mentoring, section 3, research, section 4 and 5, the professional and university services. And so you just, these are kind of coming together. So just keep that in mind. And so for the teaching and mentoring, teaching is not just the classroom teaching, but clinical teaching in a ward, operating room, clinic, and giving special seminar during the ground round is completely fine as teaching. And also, if you are mentoring students for research, that's also a very important activity that can be documented and explained to the CAP in this category. And even if you don't have access to graduate students, you might be mentoring the fellows, undergraduate students, visiting scholars, high school students, and even the lab personnel like the specialists and lab technicians. These are also mentoring, so you can document those. But if you are mentoring junior faculty members, mainly for career development, that can be better fit in a service activity rather than here. Okay, and the more weight is really given to those teaching activities with the teaching evaluation. So it's really important that any teaching and lectures you give, you get the evaluation back. And you can ask the department administrators help in terms of try to get the proper evaluation forms and the content. Okay, and so again, these are the two pieces of evidence. So the reflective teaching statement and also the teaching evaluation. So these are basically the summary of what I already explained. So you can look at it. These slides will be available. Okay, so the research and creative activities, basically the important thing is, again, is that the CAP is not all in biomedical sciences. So it's important for you to explain your role in your research or creative activity and the impact of what you do, right? And so these are some of the tips that you want to keep in mind. And also research grants and external funding needs to be included in creative activity, and mainly because those reflect the competitiveness of your research program or creative activity, that you can compete against other people in the nation to get money, right? And so that really kind of tells you the value of what you're doing. So that's what the CAP is kind of trying to assess. And so in terms of the creative activities, important thing is the publications. And it's very important that you want to have these publications peer reviewed. Of course, some of the commentaries may not be peer reviewed, but you always have to have some publications that are peer reviewed, and that's really what matters. And it's important that some of them you are first or senior author or corresponding author to show that you're taking the leadership roles in that project. And nowadays, CAP understand more about the team research. And so if you're a middle author, that is fine. But it's really important that you explain your unique contribution, your unique and pertinent contribution to the project as a middle author. So the CAP really just want to know the context and how you contribute to the research. And publications can also be kind of explained in terms of the impact of a publication can be explained using several different ways. If you publish papers in high impact journals like Nature, Cell Science, by all means, you can mention about the impact factors. But impact factors, as you may recall, is the librarian used to decide which journals to subscribe. And sometimes you have papers published in the respected specialized journals in your field, but the impact factor itself may not be that high. So in that sense, keep citing impact factor doesn't make too much difference and doesn't make sense. And so in that case, you can, for example, talk about how well your papers read and cited by the peers in the field. And H-index is the basically is the matrix for you as a scholar. So you can use all these different things, that can be most effectively explain the impact of what you're doing. Okay, there's like, Brian, do you want to wait till the end to answer questions and stuff?
Yeah, I was just typing, saying we'll cover the questions at the end.
Okay, all right. Sorry. Okay, so wait, I'm going too fast. Oh yeah, okay. So, and then additional part of the research creative activity is the extramural funding. So as I mentioned before, getting money from outside means that your project, what you're doing is competitive enough and to attract this outside money. So that's really a good indication that CAP is looking for. And again, it's very important that you can have a lot of co-investigator grants, but in the end, it's very important that you have some grants that are PI, you are PI or MPI, or some clinical trials that you are site PI, or actually the trials may be investigator initiated to show that you are really taking the leadership roles in that. And if you have to have some research protocols that with the IRB approval, I know it's a lot of work, but if it hasn't been started or it's not funded by industry, then you can explain this in your research statement rather than including in the this AP10 form. And the clinical X and adjunct faculty members have a different expectation for the creative activities. And you can publish case reports, review articles, book chapters. You don't always need to be doing research and getting a research grant. But again, it's very important that publications are peer reviewed. And also clinical trials that you're doing, you as a PI or site PI to show your leadership. Okay, so now going into the service. So the professional service come hand in hand with the professional recognition, because if you are asked to do some service, that means you are recognized as an expert in the field. Right? And if you receive awards, honors, that's a great indication for your professional recognition. And if you're invited to give seminars at other universities and professional meetings, that's great. And also, if you are asked to serve on the editorial board or review papers in the relevant journals, or if you are asked to serve on the NIH study section as a standing member, that's a great indication for national recognition. So those should be all documented. And also, if you do community outreach activities, that's great. CAP appreciate that, and you should document that as well. And here you can also write if you mentor junior faculty members. Okay, and then also for the clinicians with the clinical duties, here this professional service and also university service where you can show evidence for clinical competence. If you are chosen as the best doctor USA or super doctor in Orange County, that's great. You should document that. And if you are board certified, you can certainly put that in this section. And if you're taking leadership roles in your clinical activities in your department or division, that should actually go into section, the next section for university service, but that's also a great evidence for clinical competence. And so the university service can be at different levels, serving on committees at departments, School of Medicine. And if you're a Senate member, you can also serve on committee on campus wide. And sometimes even you can serve on the UC wide committees. And if you serve on the hospital committees, you can also list us under the School of Medicine. And if you are senior faculty members and you're getting expected to play leadership roles, and so if you are department chair, division chief, or ORU director, that's a great evidence, great things to write as a university service. And I'd like to emphasize that if you are assistant professors, your priority is to establish your independence in creative activities. So you have to have courage to say no sometimes, and you really have to talk to the mentor and chair to make sure that you're not overdoing any service activities. For inline and in-residence faculty members, just doing one campus-wide committee like library committees is sufficient until you get tenure. But once you get tenured, then you are expected to start doing more service activities, both professional and university. And because the important philosophy of the University of California is the shared governance. And so you are expected to play important major role, active roles in the steering the university activities as a committee members. Okay. So this is some tips from the CAP and AP, and CAP really looking for the context in the service activities. So not just listing, oh, I'm in this committee, that committee, but you want to give a little bit more details, like how much time you are spending on that. Is it compensated or volunteered? And, that kind of details. And also, if the department letter or yourself can compare, how your service activity is compared to, the standard of other faculty members in the department. If you're doing more, that's something that that letter should mention. And again, if you're going up to a higher level in the faculty ranks, and then you are really expected to play major role in the leadership roles in the service activity. And I just wanted to mention that diversity is something that CAP also encourage and appreciate. And so you can mention that in AP10 in this, the appropriate sections, or as I said before, if you're playing major roles in this area, you can have a separate personal statement. And important things that I like to emphasize is that please do not include personal data or names of the diversity, the mentees or faculties in your statement or in AP10. And they really tighten this. So you're going to get your file back returned for correction if you happen to write specific names of the diversity minority students. Okay, so just please be careful with this. And this just kind of a bullet point of what you may be kind of aiming for promotion from assistant to associate or associate to full professor for this line in residence and adjunct series. And again, adjunct series only require 2 out of 3 activities. And this is a clinical X series, the tips. And I'm not going to go into details, but basically assistant to associates may be regional recognition, associate to full professor is national and international recognition as you go up higher. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the last 10 minutes or so. I want to talk a little bit about how, if you deviate from this the merit timetables. So maybe there's certain things just not going the way you expected. You might feel you need more time. And so you can take these different actions. So assistant professors, no matter what, your file need to be reviewed every 2 years. And so you can do no action, meaning reappointment to the same step. But nevertheless, you have to go through the merit review every 2 years. So just keep that in mind. And only for assistant professors, you could use this mechanism called stop the clock, STC, to give a little bit extra time for MCA or the promotion. And right now, for those faculty members who started on or before June 2022, you can use up to 2 COVID stop the clock, okay? And in addition to this, you have a regular one stop the clock you can use. This is for personal and family reasons. For example, maternity leave, or if your family member is sick and you have to take care of the person, you can use this. And for the associate and full professor, you can do deferral. Okay, so this is just if you're supposed to go up for merit increase, but you just want to need 1 extra year, and you can just defer for 1 year. So you can do that. Okay, so that's when you need time. But you might be in a situation, everything's going great, and you might think about going up faster in the climb up the ladder. So then you can think about acceleration. There are different types of acceleration. So it's a 1 year, 2 year. So in the case of professors, because you get reviewed every 3 years, so you can ask for 1 year acceleration, 2 year acceleration, or whole step acceleration. For the early associate and the assistant professor, it's 1 year or whole step, right? Because it's 2 years. Okay. And understandably, it's easier to do smaller acceleration than whole step. But sometimes it's easier if you ask for whole step, because then if it doesn't work out, you can just go for the normal step and you don't waste your file preparation. Okay. And so, and then important thing is that faculty must be outstanding in 2 out of 3 areas. Okay. So it's pretty common that you publish in Sales Nature and you got a huge grant and you're doing great, department is excited and want to reward you, but if you have been neglecting teaching and service, then doing great in science, the research alone is not going to work. It would always have to be 2 out of 3. So you need to make a decision and what is your strengths, and then you always want to maybe have something really going in either teaching or service, depending on what you like to do. Okay. And also you have to be at least satisfactory in a 3rd area. And these 2 areas need to be clearly stipulated in the department letter. Okay. And also CAP will consider, it's not sufficient on its own, but CAP will definitely consider the DEI activity as a plus when you're going for the acceleration. Okay. And so this is again little tips from the AP and CAP. And this is kind of what the CAP said, so I wanted to show you. So if you are, again, acceleration is outstanding contribution in 2 areas, and one has to be the research creative activity and the one other area. right? And if you're going for the whole step acceleration, you're expected to accomplish volume and impact twice as high as the normal merit increase. And the second area, if it's a service, again, volume and impact twice as high with the evidence of leadership. And for if you pick teaching as a second area, volume is not necessarily need to be twice as high, but the impact should be expected to be high, twice as high with the evidence for leadership. So these just keep this in mind. And if the department, there are some faculty members against that acceleration, then the department should take 2 votes. One is for acceleration and one for the normative action. And that's what you can do if you're going for the whole step increase. Okay. Whereas if you're only doing 1 year or 2 year, then if you get denied, then it's a waste. You have to do this, still do the regular merit review according to the timetable. Okay, and I just wanted to discuss a little bit of stats. So last year, over 420 cases went through the CAP, and 30% of those acceleration. Actually, 91 of these 425 are coming from School of Medicine. So we really give a lot of files to the central review. And out of this, 1/3 of this proposed acceleration, CAP basically agreed about half of it. Okay, and you can see that for the 1 year acceleration, 2 year, then 1 step acceleration, 1 step acceleration is harder, so only half of it. But whereas the 1 year is about 2/3 CAP agreed. Okay, and so if you look at the School of Medicine, last year, about 23% went for acceleration of the total files. So the total file was 91, and the 70 was normal proposal, 21 was accelerated proposal. And out of these, CAP made a full agreement for this much. Okay, so it's about 1/3. Okay, and then they had a full disagreement for proposed action this much. Okay, so they actually do, right? And if CAP really have a full disagreement, typically this does not go through, okay? And so if you look at this average, actually in 2 years before, fewer files went for acceleration, but higher rate of success. And so in the end, it's about 7 to 8% of all files are successfully going for acceleration. And the 2 things that you should keep in mind. So one is what you accomplish sufficient for acceleration. And another aspect is that it's what you accomplish sufficient to be at that particular step that you are proposing into, right? And so there's a higher bar required for acceleration if it's going through major steps, promotion, advancement to Professor 6 or above scale. And also, I saw quite a few files where you might have been hired in a pretty high starting step of assistant professor. So by the time you're going for promotion, you already max out step 6. So the step 6 overlap with the step 2 of the associate professor. So if you just go up normal, you're going to go into step 3 of associate professor. But if you're doing great, department wants to reward you, and then perhaps kind of proposed you can go up to step 4 of the associate professor. But the problem is that the step 4 is overlapping with the step 1 of professor. So that means you're really skipping the associate professor, and then you're trying to go from assistant to the full professor step 1 level. So that makes it much harder to do this acceleration, more than like trying to go from step 1 to step 3 type of acceleration. So that's just keep that in mind. Okay. So then the CAP may deny the proposed action, okay? And so in that case, CAP really usually give a memo called tentative decisions. And for the assistant professor promotion, you can keep adding new accomplishments that you made even after the deadline of September 30th until the CAP actually make the final decision. So you can do that as assistant professor if you think it's necessary. But for the above associate and full professor, associate professor promotion, you cannot do that. Okay, and typically for the senior professors, if CAP makes tentative decision, that's usually it. And because you cannot add any additional information after the September 30th of the review period, and if you did a good job in AP10, all the information should already be included in the AP10. So you cannot really, try to convince CAP that the decision is not, correct. And so just keep that in mind. Okay, and then what you can do is you can either accept your decision, accept the CAP's decision, or withdraw the file and just resubmit in the following year. And sometimes that's easier, right? If you try for 1 year acceleration, CAP didn't go for it, you just withdraw and then just, submit the normal merit file in the following year. So you can do that. Okay, and then finally, I just want to talk a little bit about switch series. So you may, as a HS clinical faculty members, you may get, R01 grant from NIH. Then that would certainly justify switching the series to perhaps clinical X or even the in-residence series. So if the change occur in terms of your duties or the situation change, then you can consider switching series. However, and then here's some summary of the clinical X definition because it's kind of has a fine nuance. And so it's a Senate, but it's not tenured. And your creative activity is a little different from what's expected for inline in residence. And you really have to have clinical duties teaching in addition to creative output. So these are really, something that you can kind of read about if you're thinking about this. And so here is a more summary of switching to different series and then just summary of what might, be, the feature of each series. And so clinical X creative activities doesn't need to be research. And it could be related to your the clinical specialty, right? And then, but you still need to show that your leadership role and your publications peer reviewed and the peer recognition is really important. And for the in-residence, this is, I think, is the toughest series because you have to cover your salary, but your review criteria is basically same as the inline series. Okay, and basically you have to have extramurally funded research with you as a PI to show your leadership role, and you have to do a strong accomplishment in all three areas. And so that's that. And one thing I'd like to point out is that from last year, especially, AP is really tightening about this switching go back and forth series. So they really want you to do, allowed to do once. Okay, so before switching, you should really discuss with the chair and the mentors and to really kind of, it's a big decision and it's a one-time thing and you cannot, kind of lightly go back and forth. Okay, so finally, we really put a lot of effort and emphasis on the junior faculty mentoring. And so you should have designated faculty mentor in the department at the time of hire. You should definitely take advantage of that. And many departments nowadays have their own mentoring committees. And also, Dr. Cummings and Dr. Parek, they are specialized in the faculty development, and Dr. Cummings run the Slack channel where you can directly ask questions or communicate with others. And also we do post mid-career appraisal meeting and to put whatever the results that you got in the context to help you better prepare for the promotion. And also, you are actually, you can sit and observe advisory committees, ARAC and CXAC meetings to learn how people put together their files and how they discuss the files and, vote. And this really give you a good perspective about, your merit and promotion process. And of course, these monthly Mondays that you're attending right now is a great also opportunity to learn different aspects of the career development. And also, School of Medicine offer campus-wide NIH bootcamp, basically to help you submit your first R1. But also, you can, ask the feedback for any research proposal for even the private foundation once you're in this program. So you should definitely take advantage of that. And also, the School of Medicine has a mentoring committee which typically take care of you mid-career appraisal. And there are one committee for inline in residence and adjunct, and the other committee specialized for clinical X series. So if you receive any emails offering to meet, I would take advantage of that because they'll give you a different perspective outside of your department in terms of the career advancement. Okay, so these are just helpful websites, and that's it. Oops. All right. So if you have any questions.
Yeah, there were some questions. So going back to the first one in the chat, Oscar asked, can trainees in the lab, such as graduate students or undergraduates, provide teaching evaluations?
So you can, Brian, maybe you can also mention, but you can ask for that. But typically for mentoring, we don't ask for evaluations, right? Is it true?
Well, so I would say if you're you need teaching from coursework, like teaching in the medical school curriculum, teaching residents or fellows. If the only teaching you have is from undergraduates in your laboratory, yes, you could survey them. The trouble is you could ask for their feedback. The trouble is it's not anonymous feedback. You're not going to have a large enough sample size that you can fairly administer that. So
They're not going to say bad things about you
yeah.
for sure.
So my advice would be, if that's the only thing you could do, you'd have to be creative about it and say that I solicited feedback from my mentees, and here's how I did it in a way that was either anonymous or non-threatening, and here are the changes in my laboratory structure that I did based on that feedback. But it's not going to be the same thing as what CAP's looking for in terms of formal course evaluation.
So now I remember. So one thing you can do is to let them apply for Europe undergraduate scholarship, the research fellowship, because it shows that you're a good mentor. You're basically not having them work to do whatever the lab tech job, but actually you care about their projects and their project is reasonable enough to get fellowship. So that shows the good evidence for good mentoring. So you can do that, and you can list if the students receive Europe, then you can write that. So the Europe scholarship, they offer twice a year, and almost everyone can get it. And so I suggest that you go for that.
Jeff, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. Another thing you can get is peer reviews from other faculty of your teaching. It still doesn't substitute for proper teaching evaluations from students of your coursework. So it really is important for you to teach in courses that are formal courses that provide feedback anonymously and without you being involved.
Yeah.
All right. So this is that balance. I'll just add one more thing here. The balance between if you teach too much, your research will suffer and you need to get your lab and your funding going. On the other hand, if you don't do any teaching, you're not going to have formal evaluations, and you need teaching evaluations. So you got to do something, and you want to be talking to your department chair and your mentors about what is it that I could teach that is right up my alley or is suitable for me, that won't be too much of a burden, but will get me the evaluations that I need. And then to add to Jeff's comment about a peer evaluation, what you could do, for example, is invite a colleague or your department chair to attend a lab meeting or two and watch you run a lab meeting and field questions and give mentorship to your students, and then have them write a separate evaluation or provide you feedback and show that you are listening to and interested in evaluations of your teaching. Your teaching in the laboratory is important, but that way you're doing it from a third party or another faculty member, and not putting your student at risk. Another question that came up as you were presenting, Kyoko, was how does one go about getting outside letter writers? Who's in charge of that?
So we're supposed to, so the faculty and the department should supposed to come up with an independent list of letter writers. And so they are designated as department nominated and candidate nominated. And the candidate and then there's two flavors. One is conflicted and one's non-conflicted. And so the conflicted is, for example, you are former PI, so they are forever conflicted. And the cap and the, for review, people put a more emphasis on departmental nominated, non-conflicted letters, and you're required to have at least 3, and you have no control over it. Department is coming up with their own list. However, if nowadays, if there overlap between what you suggest and department suggests, department can pick those as a department nominated. So that's better than before. And so you just have to make sure. And then, as I said before, it's always good to have the letters from other UC campuses, especially if you are in the Clinical X series.
So then I would just add one more thing to that. That was great, Kyoko. Do not contact letter writers yourself. So this is, that's why I made sure we fielded this question is, it's not that you come up with a creative list and then you go contact those folks. You're coming up with a list of writers that you think would be suitable to evaluate you, and you provide that information to the department chair and the department CAO, and they're the ones that are going to solicit those letters. You should have no connection whatsoever with that.
Right.
Stranger things have happened.
And please do not provide like the demo letters. It's just no.
So another question while we have you, Kyoko, is could you clarify how no action happens? Does the faculty member ask for it? And somewhere in your notes, you had said that there was a date that they have to put that in by.
Oh, okay.
I can find the no action date, but can you explain no action?
Are you talking about the assistant professor?
Yes.
Okay, so
your notes say that the in their 3rd year, by June 30th of their 3rd year, they will have to have asked to defer a mid-career appraisal. But that's not exactly the same thing as a no action. Why would somebody want to do a no action?
So no action is that if, for example, you have no publications, you haven't got the grants, and you haven't done too much activities, creative activities, because you're still like set up your lab, right? Sometimes it happens. And in that case, then there's no point of pushing, try to go up in the next merit. You have to have some accomplishment in order to go up to the next level. Then in that case, through discussion with the chair, usually, that you might be recommended to do no action. Is that okay, Jeff?
Yes.
Right there. And there's the June 30th deadline.
Right.
All right. Do we have any other questions from folks in the audience? You're welcome to type something in a private chat to me if you'd like.
Or we can stop recording and we can go on.
Indeed. So actually, let's stop the recording now, Sophie. That would be fine.